The Honourable Nikki Kay.
Mr Speaker, it is time that the Labor Party apologised for what they have said and done regarding Chinese Kiwis and house buying in Auckland. I attended a meeting, actually at the time when Phil Twyford made the comments that he did, when he racial profiled in Auckland, and I attended a meeting of a whole lot of Chinese Kiwis. They were hurt and they were upset. And they had every right to be hurt and upset, because what I have heard what I know in politics is that it's the people that lead New Zealand and get support when you actually tackle the real issues, and when you actually understand that they are sometimes more complicated, and when you actually are truthful about what's really going on. So what happened? What we heard from Phil Twyford was 39.5% of the houses being purchased were being purchased with people of foreign Chinese-sounding surnames. The reality is, and we've spent a lot of time working through an information regime to have a look at this, is actually we may be dealing with possibly 2 to 3%. And even if you believe that data could be better, 2 to 3%. It is time that Phil Twyford stood up in this House and said to a whole lot of people who were offended that actually he was wrong. He was wrong, and actually there are much more pressing issues in terms of housing for New Zealanders, both around supply, around the issues of having special housing areas, around RMA reform, which that side of the House are not supporting, that will make a greater difference to New Zealand than smearing a whole lot of Kiwis, some of which have lived here all their lives, with the kind of half-baked information that Mr Twyford put up. Another group of people that need an apology from Labor. We've heard a lot about tax, and we've heard a lot about the Panama Papers. The reality is, again, when you learn in politics, when people go on conspiracy hunts, when they don't have proper data, when they haven't thought through what they're actually looking at, innocent people can be hurt. Now, we have an inquiry into whether there are genuine things that we can do to improve our tax system, and that is absolutely the right thing to be doing. So any question by the opposition that we're not doing something is absolutely false and not true. But when you take hacked information and you start Googling through it, and other people's names are then put on national television, the reality is, I think New Zealanders can see what it is. They can actually see that the people who should be running the country are the people who are focused on big issues and initiatives. Yes, there may be genuine issues around some of the tax stuff, but actually, again, using half-baked data, like with the Chinese surnames, it does not command the confidence of a country that you can run the country. What that's about is actually the opposition trying to get airtime, trying to be able to get enough time on the national news to be able to raise their profile, but what they're actually doing is they're destroying their credibility because they are not being rational in terms of policy, and they're not recognising that there are people who are collateral damage, whether it is Chinese Kiwis or whether it is other innocent Kiwis that have been brought through with this Panama situation. The next area that I want to tackle is the fact that what have our government been doing this week? What have our government been doing last week? They've actually been focused on some of our most vulnerable Kiwis. And people can see it. When I was door knocking the other week, what did they ask me about? They did not once, not one person asked me about Chinese foreign surnames in Auckland or about the tax issues. What they asked me about was things like emergency housing. What they asked me about was, what are you doing in terms of some of our most vulnerable and medicines? The reality is, this week's been a great week for the government because we've announced real packages of support for those people. 39 million in terms of Whānau, 3,000 more emergency places in terms of housing. We've announced 1,250 more teacher aid support. That means that we're now up to 550,000 more hours of teacher aid support. These are the issues that matter. I do believe it is time that the Labor Party stepped up to the plate, started to focus on policy, stopped dragging people through the mud, and apologised particularly to those Chinese Kiwis that were offended by Phil Twyford's remarks.
Dr.